Hi, and welcome to Modern Servant Leader. Today we have a real treat for you. I'm here with Larry Spears, who's really one of the godfathers of servant leadership, if you will. Larry has written a ton of books, knows a great deal about Greenleaf's views on servant leadership. In fact, he was the CEO and president of Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership for almost 2 decades, and now runs the Spears Center for Servant Leadership.
So I use Robert Greenleaf's definition, the idea that it is the servant leader is servant first. I also think that his best test of servant leadership is critical. To paraphrase, are people healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? Mm-hmm. And what's the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? I think one of the key challenges is an understanding of the underlying definition and philosophy or belief that Robert Greenleaf wrote about as part of servant leadership. I think it's sometimes tempting for folks who are genuinely excited about servant leadership to want to kind of jump into implementation without having done the personal work that is necessary. Mm-hmm. Servant leadership begins with the individual, and then once you have kind of a critical mass of individuals within an organization, it is also then possible for organizations to act as servant-led institutions. But you can't get to that point, I think, realistically, without having invested some time in your own personal growth and development. I would say servant leadership, as defined by Robert Greenleaf, is neither religious nor secular, but it's congruent with both. And so I don't see it as either a religious concept or a secular concept. I find the idea of the word spirit, which is a word that Robert Greenleaf used frequently as well, is a helpful linking term, because I think whether you're approaching servant leadership from a religious or faith-based approach or from a secular application within a business or the kind of institution, everyone understands what spirit is, and particularly what the absence of spirit can mean when you don't find it in an organization. It's my belief, and it's also been my own experience, that there is no place that servant leadership cannot operate. So let me take a couple of slices at this. First, I think it's important to realize that anybody can choose to practice servant leadership wherever they are. It does not require the approval of your manager or CEO. Servant leadership is within us, and it's about who we want to be, how we want to try to relate to other people. And we don't need anyone's approval to act as servant leaders within organizations. So, I think it's important to recognize that we can start practicing servant leadership within ourselves and within organizations where we work. One of the arenas where I've seen the least voicing of servant leadership in some ways has been actually in the political government sphere. If there's an area where I'd like to begin to see more people talking about servant leadership, it would be in that realm.
And practicing it more.
Exactly. Yes, a couple of different thoughts come to mind. One is has been the growth of servant leadership internationally. It started out as Bob Greenleaf from the U.S. And the focus of the Greenleaf Center for 20 or more years was really focused on the U.S. When I came to the Greenleaf Center in 1990, I had a particular interest in a couple of different areas. One was around the possibilities of international development around servant leadership. Another was the idea of servant leadership as related to education, and particularly higher education, but community education and other kinds as well. And so in both of those areas, I've seen tremendous growth and development. In the last 25 years, there has been an explosion, really, of awareness and practices of servant leadership around the world. I think that anyone who is interested in servant leadership genuinely can practice it. Of course, you can feel lonely if you feel like you're the only person who's attempting to practice servant leadership within an organization. And so trying to find allies within whatever organization you're in is a good starting point. So having said that, I do know there are people who are also interested in working for servant-led organizations. And so for me, one of the great things you've done over the years with Modern Servant Leader has been the compilation of these lists of organizations, businesses, other kinds of institutions that have embraced servant leadership in, I think, a wide range of ways. But I think one of the great things you've done is to help at least provide some starting point where people who would like to work for a servant-led institution can begin to explore and perhaps attain that possibility for themselves.
Well, thank you, Larry. And I did not pay Larry to put that plug in there for Modern Servant Leader. But thank you. I appreciate it.
It's heartfelt. I think it is possible for self-serving people to change over time. I think, we see examples in life and literature of people who start out one way and end up another way. Sometimes it takes a major crisis in one's life to sort of see the light, if you will, that the way they've been functioning and operating is not a good way to be in relationship with other people. So, change also doesn't always happen. I began to notice certain keywords and phrases that were appearing over and over in Greenleaf's writings. And so I eventually did a comprehensive read-through of his published work at that time and wrote down a whole list of 40 or 50 different terms, mostly characteristics of servant leaders that he was writing about. And then I went back through and began to make little tick marks every time I saw the word in his published work. And it was through that simple process that I sort of brought together these top 10 characteristics of servant leaders. Over the last 25 years, they have, I think, helped many people to sort of develop an interest around servant leadership and particularly to find ways in which they can sort of grow and develop as servant leaders.
Nice.
So I think if we seek to understand and practice listening and persuasion and healing and the other characteristics that Robert Greenleaf wrote about, it helps us to become more effective and faithful servant leaders over time.
Nice. Nice. And for those of you watching, if you're not familiar with the characteristics of servant leadership that Larry's been talking about, we'll make sure and provide a link to those on Spear Center's website for them to all see as well.
In general, I think that leadership is about people, and management is about systems and other things. So I think the essence of this is servant leadership is about relationships between people. And so while some people have, I've seen people talk about servant leadership as a management approach or theory, which I don't like that word at all.
Yeah.
I think it's a philosophy of life. But it really is something that finds its greatest effect in starting with service, serving others, and then looking for ways to lead.
I like it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Larry, if there's anybody who wants to follow up with you or learn more about your work and the Spear Center's work, how do they find you?
Well, I'm on the internet at www.spearscenter.org. So there's a website there with lots of free articles and essays that you can download and other information on servant leadership as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Larry. It's really an honor and a pleasure. We appreciate you taking the time for Modern Servant Leader.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for the work that you do. I really appreciate it, too.
Thank you. Till next time, keep serving.